One of the most important things while developing a game is getting feedback from people outside of the active creation process. Game development very often takes up a long time, and when you're playing and testing your own game over and over again, it's not a rarity that at some point you can't really tell anymore if it's any fun or not. In this case, it would be great to get others to play and judge your game to either validify you or to get you back on the right track. But where do you actually find people willing to give you honest feedback? While friends and family might be an option, they often have a biased perspective. Instead, joining game development communities or engaging with online spaces where players and fellow developers gather can be incredibly valuable. These communities not only offer fresh perspectives, but can also help you build connections with like-minded creators. I'm active in various communities, but I would like to highlight one very specific example here. I'm an active member of this Discord server from the streamer Nerkmind, and he recently did a 12-hour stream to celebrate his achievements on Twitch. He was doing some kind of preparations for this big stream, finding content and stuff, and since he knew I was actively working on a game, because I was not shutting up about this in his Discord server, he asked me if I would like to prepare something for him so he could give me a little spotlight in his 12-hour stream. We agreed that I could prepare a playable demo for him, and so everything began. So here's the plan. I got messaged about 1 week early to prepare something for the stream. At this point my game absolutely wasn't ready to be played. It mostly consisted of a bunch of loose ends that didn't really connect to each other, so I needed to stitch together something that counts as a playable game. To give a short explanation of what I'm working on, the game is called Echo Shred, and it's a horror game where you investigate procedurally generated areas to find old scrap which you bring to your train, which is basically your portable home base. Your train is equipped with a shredder where you need to throw the scrap into to get paid. This gives you some kind of currency that you can use to upgrade your train and buy items. The areas you travel to are of course full of dangers, so you better watch out. It's supposed to be a multiplayer game, but to begin with I'm building it as a single player experience and add the multiplayer portion later. At this point I had procedurally generated dungeons, a basic inventory system, one enemy, some fancy assets, a starting area, a train with a terminal and a shredder, and another train station with a generated dungeon I could travel to. There wasn't a goal in the game, no progress, and nothing really to be done, to be honest. During that week of time I had, I wanted to add as much content as possible. I thought that creating a full introductory level would be cool to show the players what the mood of the game is like. So I got to work. The first thing I did was to create a new area that was supposed to have this mysterious vibe. Players kinda get thrown into the game, they don't really know what's going on or where they are, but they sense that something isn't quite right. I built this underground lab with some techy looking walls and interior. I needed some kind of spawn point where everything begins, so I modeled a capsule in Blender where the player originates from. The capsule is placed in a room in the lab. I also added a second capsule right next to the first one which remains closed, and a bunch of other rooms that also have closed capsules. By doing this, I hope to create this feeling that you're alone while actually not being alone. This eerie feeling like just being a number, an experimental entity of many others to come. The player can't really look into other rooms, just peeking through the closed off doors. I needed to create a connection between these separated areas, so I decided to build a floor with some other textures to get some variation into the looks. To get from the underground to the top where the train is going to be found, I added a ladder the player has to climb. For that I also needed to build a new mechanic just for climbing the ladders. Since I am using state machines for my movement system, this was easy and straightforward to implement without messing up the rest of my code. I made a video on the state machine stuff earlier, so if you're interested it will be in the video description. For the train I decided to add an introductory mission to get the train initially running. I intentionally broke the train so it's not usable anymore. The terminal of the train is just showing a screen that says the OS is damaged and needs to be reinitialized. For that I added another couple items, a so-called quantum disk that contains the OS, a quantum disk reading device that is installed in the train right next to the terminal, and of course all the code behind all that to make it work. This is the part where it's getting interesting, because a quantum disk is of course nowhere near to be found. I again built another area for that purpose. Right next to the train station I added a maintenance area where I placed some lockers, a tiny maze, some furniture and 2 jump scares, but more to that later. One of the lockers is initially in a locked state and the players need to find a key first to unlock it. This also introduced another locking-unlocking mechanic that I needed to implement. The key for that is located somewhere else. The general information of what's happening, what the player has to do and so on is communicated through pieces of paper. It's pretty much the same that you may know from other games, so you see a piece of paper, pick it up, it gets placed in front of the camera for the player to read, and meanwhile the general movement capabilities of the player are going to be disabled. Again, a bunch of code that needed to be integrated into the present systems just for that. Behind this room I designed a small maze the players have to get through. On the other side of that I placed another room that contained the key for the locker earlier, but I decided that the locker only shows some items the player might need, but not yet the quantum disk for getting the train operational again. Instead there's a note that says where the quantum disk is supposed to be at, and reading that sign actually triggers the spawn of the quantum disk in the same room where we found the key, and that also triggers an event for another jump scare. I know it might sound kinda lame to force the player to go back to where they have just been at, but I followed an intention with that, also more to that in a bit. Eventually the player can get back to the train with the quantum disk, insert it to the disk reader and force the OS to get reinitialized. After that the regular gameplay is unlocked, where the player can use the train to get to different train stations. The travel and generation mechanics were already working before that, so I didn't need to put any extra work into that. Having all this in a working state in general concludes the demo that I was aiming for. So I finished all that, packed it up in a zip file and sent it over to Nerk, just in time for his livestream. I was so hyped for that event, but that was actually before I knew that my downfall was just about to happen. So the stream was taking place, and at some point he announced that he was about to play my game.
We're gonna go play Kick's game.
In this moment I honestly had quite big hopes that this was going to go pretty well. But even before the actual game started, the first, well, let's call it inconvenience was about to happen. I did not sign my executable, so Windows marked the whole program as unsafe, as the original creator was not embedded into the files. This can be quite a problem when you want to show your game to people, as this is definitely perceived to be as something sketchy. For actual game releases this is of course an absolute no-go. But in this case, and since the streamer knew me quite well, he kinda trusted me on this one. Creating a WebGL build and upload it to itch.io would be a much better choice, and I wouldn't have signing problems too. Anyway, this kinda was strike number 1. After starting the game, strike number 2 was actually just right around the corner.
Oh, hold on.
The game music was way too loud in comparison to the sound volume in the rest of the game. Since I didn't offer any way to fine-tune these settings, Nerk simply reduced the volume of the entire application through his OS settings. While this may be not that much of a roadblock, it actually caused an actual chain of events to happen later on. Maybe some of you might recognize that, but the UI that you are seeing here was actually a blatant copy from the PS2 title .hack Infection. Back then I thought that the style and the mood of this type of screen would fit my game decently, so I rebuilt the title screen as some kind of placeholder for my game, with the intention to adjust it and give it a unique look later on as my game was taking shape. The style of the loading screen is something I came up with myself.
Cool UI.
Even though the game practically has to load barely anything, and most computers would do that in less than 1 second, I thought it was a cool idea to increase immersion and take the player by the hand to lead them into the world of the game. There simply is one item, object or entity shown to the right while rotating, and a fancy technical sounding description text on the left. On the top and the bottom I added a few lines to better highlight the shown content in the middle. Now that I try to explain that, I kinda remember that Fallout 4 does something quite similar, so yeah. But yeah, let's just ignore that.
Check this out. It's white.
Next thing after actually starting the game is the bad mouse control.
Robbers with mouse space. Oh. It's still a bit, in terms of the mouse sensitivity, it's really not great on my side.
The mouse sensitivity was tailored to my personal settings, which don't have to fit everyone else's preparation of course. Without any possibilities to change these settings, Nerk was forced to play the game with extremely unsatisfying sensitivity settings. Sorry Nerk. I added the option to change the sensitivity right after the stream, and the quickest way to do this didn't take me more than 5 minutes to implement. I simply added a float multiplier to the camera rotation code and hooked the plus and minus buttons of the numpad up to increase or decrease the multiplier value. This way all I had left to do was adding a simple hint in the UI, and bada bing bada boom, the sensitivity can now be changed.
Though the lighting messes me up a bit, I do have to squint.
Some things that he mentioned is that he liked the UI, which is good, and the lighting was messing him up, which is, well, bad. Actually, he said that more than just once. Now that I'm seeing that, I completely agree to the lighting part. The thing is that horror games are often very, very dark. It's more or less an ancient rule that darkness and not being able to see everything around you triggers some sort of fear that, biologically speaking, was always there since the beginning of humanity. That's why horror games or movies so often aim to exploit that. But if it's executed wrong, like in my case, it can actually be super annoying since it's robbing you of your sense of navigation in an unknown place. And shortly after that he got to the train and, well, immediately tried to shred himself. It's pretty much expectable that players would eventually try that, but this wasn't implemented in the game at that point. And yeah, it's definitely a little gag that I will add in the future. One little detail is that he was trying to pick up some props that I put there, but that was actually only to fill the environment a bit more. There isn't any kind of functionality or use attached to that, it's just visual. The game was missing this kind of feedback to tell the player which elements can actually be interacted with and which not. And in the best case, this would be some kind of visual or audio cue that highlights interactable elements when seen. Following that, and not only because of the bad mouse controls, he got lost and asked for direction in the chat.
Kick, tell me where I should go, what I should do to showcase what you got working right now.
Meanwhile, he got caught up at a simple meaningless placeholder asset of a map that I had floating around my assets folder. I simply placed it there so it doesn't look so empty. He spent a bit of time there to look, which can be perceived as pointless, but to me it was a signal that people playing this game may actually want to learn about the world, about the game of the world, by checking out what's laying around in some more detail. Generally speaking, this could be explained as environmental storytelling, but up to this point I wasn't really paying much attention to that, but I noted that I need to put some more time into that topic. Another complaint about the mouse movement was coming up before the game progression continued. He progressed through the corridor of the maze I mentioned earlier, where I prepared the first jump scare. Or at least I thought it was a jump scare. But yeah, let's just check out his reaction. So yeah, you probably missed that, but the bad sound design and the low volume work together hand in hand to make the jump scare appear completely non-existent. By walking through the gap in here, the can on the ground is actually kicked around, which is triggering the activation of a monster screaming and walking around that maze. But yeah, this was kind of missed. Here's a little clip that I recorded afterwards, after some kind of fine-tuning stuff, to show you what my intention was with that. So yeah, the reaction I wanted to achieve with that was like, oh my god, what was that? Following a very careful progression through that maze, because that thing could still be lurking around. That obviously did not work in this case, so the playthrough just continued like that. He eventually found another note I've written with the intention to strengthen the world building, and this is where he mentioned that the font is really off.
Tried to figure out where it was coming from, but of course the C are weird.
Again, something that I 100% agree to. The C character is shaped in a way that makes it look like an opening parenthesis, and yeah, this kinda breaks the reading flow. Shortly after that, he found the key for the locker earlier and another note that explains the importance of the key.
So we gotta get a key to find a quantum computer, but oh, this is the key. I picked up the key.
There actually just was this one key in the game at this point, and if you would proceed to lose it or throw it into the shredder, there wouldn't be any way to open up the locker and continue through the events that I've prepared. On the way back to the locker, he kinda got lost in the maze. It took him a few tries running back and forth until he found the exit. Now, I don't really know if this is again just about the bad mouse movement or if the level design was actually that bad, but I learned that perhaps I need to make the path through the level a bit more obvious, since he probably would not be the only one getting lost there. The shape of the maze itself is actually pretty linear, I would say, but again, because of the flawed navigation capabilities, it might get hard to get through there.
Your PB is not going to be good.
My PB is going to be shit.
Eventually, he made it back to the room with the lockers and struggled just a bit to open like the correct one. This again was a sign for me that the feedback situation in the game wasn't good and needs to be improved. One intention I had with the stuff inside the locker went completely unnoticed, unfortunately. He tried to use the health kit, which triggered a text box that says, "I don't need this right now." Left that completely uncommented and continued. My idea with that was that the player might think that they are definitely going to need this later, as some kind of incoming damage is about to happen. And looking back at the missed jump scare with the monster, I thought that players might think that this is going to have a reappearance and that they might need to escape while possibly getting attacked. But yeah, this absolutely did not work the way I intended. I'm still thinking how I could improve this design, so if you're having some cool ideas with that, yeah, please let me know. He picked up the flashlight and started to read the final note that I left there, saying that the quantum disk is not in the locker, but back in the room where we found the key instead, at some place high up.
Oh my god, you're gonna make me do that for real? Okay, well at least now we got a flashlight so we get to see things.
I kinda understood that he didn't like the idea that I made him backtrace because it was such pain going through that maze and with all that mouse movement situation and stuff. But yeah, in general I thought the experience would be a different one. One tiny thing that was noticed is that the control hints on the top left of the screen don't really fit the game's current situation.
Use item would be E. Nope. Kick. How do I, F. Thank you.
The hints say to press E to use an item, but in this case it was actually F for using the flashlight. I didn't really think so much about that and expected people to press F naturally because this is just like the most commonly used key for toggling flashlights in games. But after seeing this I understood that my presentation was confusing. Later on I mostly got rid of the hints at the top left screen corner and instead added a dynamic hint system that pops up right above the inventory slots that gives key hints according to the items currently selected. After entering the maze again with a flashlight and my intended effect of expecting to get attacked, I disabled the light while playing a little sound that accompanies a breaking fuse. I hoped I was able to tighten the suspension to the limit, but that again wasn't really happening. That's maybe again because of the bad game design or the flawed sound design, I don't know. Back in the maintenance room, it thankfully didn't take too much time to actually find that disc.
He hid it somewhere here. That's what he said. Now there it is, that's the quantum computer. I found it.
So at least that worked out as planned. Out of the maze and back into the train now, he was able to put the disc into the disc reader next to the terminal.
Insert quantum disc. There we go.
The crosshair could be helpful, I think.
You what?
The crosshair, like in the center of the
Oh yeah, that'd
so
be...
you know what you're targeting.
A simple crosshair was requested, something that I originally intended not to add to the game because, yeah, I thought it would increase the feeling of immersion without one. But yeah, seeing the struggle without a crosshair with my own eyes made me realize that I should probably throw my original idea into the shredder and add an actual crosshair to the game. He managed to insert the quantum disk and an animation for reinitializing the train's terminal was starting to play. This again was a filler that was supposed to create a more believable environment. And then finally the slowest train ride humanity has ever seen was taking place. Choo choo!
Alright boys, we're going on the train ride. Let's go.
After glitching through the train because of some missing colliders, he was practically able to see the rest of the game with the procedurally generated dungeons. But because these were pretty empty at this point, I'd like to conclude the analysis of this playthrough here. Nogmat played through the majority of the demo, and even though a lot of hiccups occurred and he probably didn't have the greatest time, I as a developer was able to learn so incredibly much from that. I saw someone playing my game, someone who didn't play it before and was mostly not knowing what was about to happen. This served me as an in-depth analysis of where my game needs improvement. Lots of the bad parts were missing quality of life things, such as the option to adjust the mouse sensitivity, no actual feedback from highlighting items or the missing crosshair in the middle of the screen. Nonetheless, he was able to finish through the game without any major glitches or game-breaking bugs. My personal feeling after seeing this playthrough was, yeah, truth to be told, very downhearted. My expectation was a different one before that. I thought the game was going to be scary, a dense atmosphere, sparsely placed jump scares that actually connect to the game world, and in general, an engaging playthrough. I absolutely did not deliver on all of these levels. And after being sad about this for a bit, I tried to focus on the, yeah, on the upsides of that experience. I was able to get someone to play my game, and I was able to gain incredible and valuable feedback from that. Going from there, it was undoubtedly clear which steps I needed to take to make my game better in so many regards. Generally speaking, that whole situation might seem discouraging or like I failed, but even if you look at things like that, it's pretty much an inevitable situation. Game development stories are not always full of fun and success and everything going as planned. Things are getting wrong, things are not happening as you plan them out, and this is still part of the game dev experience that you should be aware of. I don't want to sugarcoat any of this, I only want to show you what it might feel like, what it might be like. But yeah, now I perceive this playthrough as one of the greatest things that could actually happen to my game and my game dev story. So yeah, that's it for this video. I hope I was able to show you how things might be going when trying to get people to play your game and how to translate what's happening on screen to actual steps on how to improve. If you would like to share your stories on how to get great feedback and how to improve your game with that, please share that down in the comments below. I would love to learn from you guys as well. I am of course still working on my game Echo Shred, and I do this in live streams on Twitch too. My channel is in the description, so if you want to pay me a little visit, you're wholeheartedly invited to do so. There's also the other stuff like social media, Mumbo Jumbo, and a link to my Discord server, so if you would like to connect, you can do this there. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope we see each other again. Have a nice day, and good luck with your game development journey. Cheers!